Good evening. Thank you for being here. Thank you for accommodating the venue change based on the significant interest. I'm Andrew Friedson. I'm the president of the Montgomery County Council. I represent this area in District 1 on the Montgomery County Council. I also serve as chair of the Planning, Housing, and Parks Committee. I'm joined this evening by Councilmember Balcom, who's here, who represents District 2. I believe Councilmember Giwando is on his way, and I believe Delegate Wallach from District 16, Sarah Wallach, has just arrived as well. We have some representatives from various offices, including several members of my team who are here. Joy Champalou from Councilmember Glass's office, from Councilmember Sales' office, Tommy Habor from I believe Brandon Stuckey is here from the BCC Regional Service Center. Thank you for being here. I know there's a number of local elected officials here. In the interest of time, if you are a local elected official, municipal leader in our community, could you stand up and be recognized? Thank you very much for being here as well. I just want to give a brief overview of why we're here, and then I'm going to turn it over to the Planning Board Chair for brief comments, and then to the Planning Director to briefly go through the slideshow to explain what the recommendations are that have come from the Planning Board to the County Council. And then we're mostly here to hear from you, to listen to you, and to hear your questions, comments, and concerns. We have a number of staff members from the council staff who are here, and like the other listening sessions that we have had, are taking notes, are aggregating the notes from the questions that we receive here for follow-up, and those ultimately will be presented to the full council prior to us taking up this issue through the legislative process. I want to reiterate that there is no legislation that is currently before the County Council. We're doing these additional listening sessions, an unprecedented level of public outreach, because we feel as a County Council that it's very important that we want to hear from you, and so that is what tonight is all about. These recommendations, as mentioned, were transmitted to the Council this past spring. The Attainable Housing Strategies had been before the Planning Board for the past several years. The Planning, Housing, and Parks Committee held 3 briefings over the summer on the recommendations in order to understand what the recommendations are that came from the Planning Board. Those are recorded, and you can see them online. As mentioned, there's currently no legislation that's currently before us, and we're receiving comments not just tonight, but through the portal that has been set up on our website to receive that information. If you registered for tonight's event or you signed in when you arrived, we will make sure that we send you the information as well following this event. So it's helpful for those who haven't signed in to sign in if you get a chance and are comfortable. The topic at hand tonight is a serious one, addressing the housing issues that we face. We all know that there are very real challenges in our housing issues in the county. It is too expensive to afford to live in Montgomery County today. The same jobs, the same careers previously that would have afforded you to live in certain parts of the county can no longer afford you to live in those areas. It's something that the entire region and much of the country is grappling with. We had the Secretary of Housing at the County Council with us yesterday talking about these issues. I was joined by the presiding officers of several of the jurisdictions around the region at a roundtable discussion specifically talking about the challenges in the housing market and in housing in general in our region. It's something that we have been focused significantly on at the County Council over the last 6 years, specifically on addressing overall housing supply and affordable housing programs. We have made unprecedented investments in affordable housing programs over the last several years as well, and efforts to preserve naturally occurring affordable housing in the county. The Planning Board has recommended this as another tool in our toolkit, so to speak, as an attainable housing option, not necessarily an affordable housing strategy, but something that would be added on top of the other issues that we face. It's not intended to be a panacea. There really are no panaceas when it comes to addressing housing. But I want to reiterate that this is a series of recommendations that have come before us from the Planning Board and is not in legislation. So I just want to note that there have been a number of reports. There have been some in the public domain who have suggested that there's going to be a vote that is taking place in October. There is not. There isn't even legislation that has been introduced or that the council is rushing this process through. The fact that we're having this meeting tonight, the fact that we've had 4 other meetings in communities across the county reflects the fact that we are not rushing anything through, and nothing has even been introduced yet at the council. And I think that the suggestions of votes taking place in October and et cetera are not accurate, and I just want to make sure I reiterate that. If legislation is introduced, when it is introduced, at that point, there is a 30-day window at which point there can't yet be a public hearing. There is a required public hearing after those 30 days. Then the legislation would go through the committee work session process, and then from there, it would go to the full council. That oftentimes takes a significant period of time, and oftentimes, particularly related to zoning measures like this one, carries multiple meetings at multiple levels of the process. So I just want to make sure everybody understands how the process works. Up to this point, we have had generally very civil conversations in these listening sessions. I hope that that will continue tonight, and would ask that everybody be respectful of each other and of their neighbors. And just want to thank you all again for joining us this evening. Thank you for being here. Thank you for caring about our community enough to show up. I really do care. We really are listening. We really are here to hear and to listen to you. With that, let me very briefly turn it over to the Planning Board Chair, Artie Harris. Then we're going to have Director Sartori quickly go through the recommendations, and then we're going to open it up to questions. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Council President Friedson, and good evening. I'm Artie Harris, Chair of the Montgomery County Planning Board. In June, the board approved and transmitted to the County Council the Attainable Housing Strategies, a collection of recommended steps to address the significant and growing housing shortage in our county. We're not building housing enough and fast enough to keep up with demand and anticipated growth. Our middle-income families are shrinking. 26,000 middle-income earners have left the county since about 2005. This includes teachers, firefighters, nurses, and even our own children and grandchildren who want to build their careers and start families in Montgomery County, but can't find housing here. Attainable Housing Strategies is just one tool, as Council President Friedson said, to consider adding our toolbox that can help by allowing more flexibility to build more housing, and specifically more types of housing along our county's growth corridors. It targets people and families that have too much income to qualify for affordability programs but still struggle to afford to live in Montgomery County. To be clear, this proposal, and at this point is just a proposal, is not a mandate for people to turn their properties into duplexes. It would simply provide some additional options that you will hear about shortly. So I'm going to turn it over now to Jason Sartori, our Planning Director.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. I'm Jason Sartori. I'm the county's planning director. And before I start, I want to call your attention to the QR code on the screen. If you haven't scanned that already, that will bring you to the PowerPoint that I'm sharing this evening. I'm going to go through the slides. That QR code will appear again at the end, so if you don't grab it now, you can get it at the end as well. And also, before I begin talking about attainable housing strategies, I want to share my own personal housing story. As an adult, I've lived in a couple of different small, low-rise apartment, garden-style apartments outside of Richmond and outside of Providence, Rhode Island. I've lived in a small apartment building with about 6 units in Somerville, Massachusetts. I then moved to downtown Baltimore and lived in a high-rise rental apartment before I moved to Montgomery County in 2002 with my wife, where we bought our first home, a townhouse in Silver Spring near the Forest Glen Metro Station. In 2009, I moved here to Bethesda in a single-family home in the Springfield neighborhood. Beginning of my life, I actually lived in a couple of ADUs, and so the point I'm trying to make with this is that at different stages of life, people live in different types of housing, have different needs and different desires in terms of housing. And this is trying to create more opportunities in Montgomery County for those different types of housing. So why did we start this? In March of 2021, the County Council sent a request to the Planning Board and the Planning Department asking us to consider and recommend, quote, zoning reforms that would allow greater opportunities for missing middle housing in Montgomery County. Missing middle housing are things like townhouses and duplexes and triplexes and quadplexes and small apartment buildings that provide people an opportunity in the middle between single-family detached homes and large multifamily rental apartments. So the project that ensued became known as Attainable Housing Strategies. The letter suggested that we should get our recommendations to the County Council within a couple of months. But here we are 3.5 years later, and we just earlier this year finally sent our recommendations, the board's recommendations, to the County Council. Again, there's nothing that is actually proposed at the moment. It's just a set of recommendations for the council to consider and to hear from the community on what people think about those recommendations. So there were 3 primary goals that the planning board set for us in this project. The first was to increase opportunities to meet the county's diverse housing supply needs. I talked about the different needs that we have at different stages of life, but just also if you take a look at our housing stock in Montgomery County, it's very heavily, nearly half of our housing stock is single-family detached homes. We have about 400,000 units. We have about 400,000 units in Montgomery County. We have a whole bunch of multifamily apartments as well. What we don't have are those opportunities for the 26,000 people who we see leaving in the middle. So the second goal was to unravel the exclusionary aspects of the county's single-family residential zones. And then the third goal was to create more opportunities for home ownership for more people, for more households in more parts of the county. Now, in the interest of time, I'm going to skip and go right into some of the data that gets to why we're doing this. So this graph shows you the effect, shows you age of a home, when a home was built in Montgomery County. This is our existing housing stock, and the average size of those units. So those that were built in the 1950s averaged 1,567 square feet. Homes built, single-family detached homes built in the current decade, over here, average nearly 3,900 square feet. And so in many parts of the county, to the tune of about 200 per year, we see homes that are much older and smaller and honestly more affordable in the 1,500 square foot range being torn down and being replaced with large single family homes that are 2, 3, 4 times larger and selling for even more. So the idea is there's an impact that size of a unit has on price. So the first thing I want to point out is that in 2023, last year, the average sales price for a single-family detached home in Montgomery County was $970,000. The first quarter of this year, it was over $1 million. By comparison, a condo, townhouse, or co-op, attached, much smaller units, have sold on average last year for $440,000. So you could see the difference that attached versus detached and size of a unit has on pricing. Now, I'll show you it as a distribution of those. These are all the home sales, single-family detached homes in Montgomery County in 2023 in blue. And you can see the largest share is in the $600,000 to $800,000 range and the $1 million to $2.5 million range. Those are all the home sales. These are the townhouse sales in green. So you can see it starts to move its way down to the lower cost area. The $400,000 to $500,000 range is where we see the largest share. And then finally, condos and co-ops. The $200,000 to $300,000 range is where we see the largest share. Again, just emphasizing the impact that the size of a housing unit has on the sales price. The next thing I want to talk about is how our neighborhoods are becoming more and more exclusive in terms of who can afford to live in our neighborhoods. So I'm going to use the 20814 Bethesda zip code as an example. The typical home from the year 2000, if it had simply increased at the rate of inflation, the value today would be $534,000 in this zip code. Thank you. Okay, so in reality, the typical home in this zip code in 2022, today, was $875,000. So what does that mean in terms of how much income you need to be able to afford to buy the typical home? To buy the typical home from 2000, again, inflated to current dollars, you would need $119,000 in income to buy that typical home today here in Bethesda. But to buy the actual, real typical home that we see today in Bethesda, you need nearly $200,000 in annual income. In terms of what that means in the share of county households who can afford to live in this zip code, the typical home from 2000, half of Montgomery County's households could afford to live in this zip code and with that typical home. But in reality, it's only 29%. This change, going from 50% to 29%, is where we're seeing that it's harder and harder for a household to be able to afford to live in this zip code. But it's not just this zip code. We looked at every single zip code in Montgomery County, and we saw similar changes. Every single zip code is becoming more and more exclusive and difficult to be able to buy a home in. It means that the only people who can afford to in a lot of these zip codes are people who are wealthy or who have generational wealth. So this is a little bit of what we're talking about when we say what you can and can't do currently today. Today in 1/3 of the county are single-family zones. You could tear down a single-family home that exists, and you can build what you see here on the left. In fact, I believe this is a home that was built in Montgomery County. But what you can't do is what's on the right. Same exact structure, same height, same lot coverage, same setback from the neighboring properties from the road. It just happens to be 2 units instead of 1. So I'd like to talk a little bit about what the recommendations were that the board made. So here are the 4 zones that we talk about with these recommendations. It's the R40, R60, R90, and R200. It's all the areas in yellow. As you get farther out, you get the lighter yellow. That's the larger lot size parcels in the R200. I'll also talk about the Thrive Montgomery 2050 growth corridors. That's what you see, the black lines on this map and the list here: Connecticut, Georgia, Maryland Route 355, New Hampshire Avenue, Old Georgetown Road, Randolph Road, River Road, University Boulevard, US 29, and Veers Mill Road. So those are the growth corridors that we're talking about. The priority housing district is part of the attainable housing recommendations. It's a combination of those last 2 slides. It's the areas in the bright blue within a 1-mile radius of our Metro, MARC, and Purple Line stations, as well as a 500-foot buffer from those Thrive growth corridors. So what does that all mean? What were the recommendations? The board made recommendations at 3 different scales with 3 different approaches in 3 different geographies. I'm going to focus mostly on the small scale, so I'm going to skip that for a second. Just here, I'm going to want to talk about, real quickly, the medium and large scale. What we're talking about with those are really focused on those Thrive growth corridors. With the medium scale, this is things like larger townhouses or 2-over-2s where you get a two-story unit on top of another two-story unit. This is something, what we've proposed there, what the board has proposed there is something that would go through a normal set of review by county agencies, that there are opportunities for public input and comment on each development that goes through that process, and it would go to the board. What? No, the medium scale is not by right. There was a comment about by right. I'm going to try to explain this so that there's no confusion over this. When we're talking about the medium scale, that is not by right. That would have to go through an approval process and allow for public input, and the medium scale here in green. The large scale, the recommendation is to create a new set of zones that would help realize the vision that's in Thrive for our growth corridors. That would be handled through a master plan process. So that change would only occur through master plans. So I'm now going to focus on the recommendations from the small scale. This is where we're talking about our neighborhoods and what we are recommending allowing there. So here, the small scale, these are those duplexes, triplexes, and quadplexes. What would be allowed under the board's recommendations would depend on which zone you're in. So in the R40, R60, and R90, you could have a duplex or a triplex anywhere in those zones. Or within that priority housing district, the blue map before, you could do a quadplex. In the R200, duplexes would be allowed everywhere, but the triplexes and quadplexes would only be allowed in the priority housing district. The key thing, two key things to point out here is that the development standards would be identical to what exists today for a single-family home, meaning the height limit doesn't change, the lot coverage limit doesn't change, setbacks, none of that changes in the recommendations that the board has made. In the recommendations that the board has made, they've made no recommended changes to those standards.
Can I just interrupt, folks? If you want to put up signs, fine. If you want to, think what you want to think, that's fine. But if you could please refrain from yelling out, it would make this a much more constructive and productive event, and will allow us to be able to take questions in a much more civil way. So please refrain from yelling out. Please refrain from being disruptive. We would very much appreciate it.
Thank you. The last thing I'll point out about this recommendations is that this would be by right, meaning that a property owner could go directly to the Department of Permitting Services. If you have an existing home on that lot, you could get a permit to demolish that existing home, and you can get a permit to build a duplex or triplex, whatever it might be. However, you would also have to be in conformance with the pattern book. The pattern book is a visual representation of the development standards, and it would identify how you can accommodate a duplex or a triplex, whatever it might be, on particular size lots in different zones. And so this would include a bunch of different examples of how you would place the building on the lot, how you would accommodate parking, how it would communicate with the street in the front. And so you would have to be in conformance with that. And then one last recommendation related to the small scale is related to the off-street parking or off-street parking requirements, so on-site parking requirements, the minimums that would be required. Today, it's 2 spaces minimum per unit. So if you were building a duplex today, if you could, you would have to build 4 spaces on the property. So under the board's recommendations, if you're outside the priority housing district and there's no street parking, then you would still have to build your 4 spaces. If there is street parking, there would be a 50% reduction, meaning you'd only have to build 2. You could build more, but the minimum requirement would be only 2. If you're inside the priority housing district, there would be a 50% reduction. And then if there's no street parking, and if there is street parking, then it's a 75% reduction. So as Council President Friedson mentioned, that this is our last in-person session. We have one more virtual session next Wednesday. People can still sign up to participate in that. And that's it. I'm going to hand it over to Council President Friedson. And again, there's the QR code to be able to download this presentation.
We're going to open it up to questions. I did quickly want to acknowledge Delegate Teresa Warman from District 16 has joined us. my colleague on the Planning, Housing, and Parks Committee, as I mentioned, who would be arriving. Will Giwando came here just before the presentation, has been here for a little while as well. Pam Luckett is here on behalf of Councilmember Gabe Albernaz as well. Jordan, let me turn it to you to explain how this is going to work with the questions. We have a lot of people here. We're going to try our best to get through as many questions as possible. I just ask two things. Number one, please remain civil. And number two, please try to keep your questions and comments as brief as possible so we can hear from as many people tonight as possible.
Great.
Jordan?
Thank you, Council President. With a show of hands, I have my colleague Marshai Salu over here as well. We'll be working both sides of the room. With a show of hands, you can raise your hand. You'll walk out to me here in the aisle, and then we'll get started, okay? I did see your hand up, so you can go ahead and stand up if possible. Yes, and we'll be alternating, okay? So I will hand you the mic if we could just limit it to about 30 seconds so we can get to everybody, one question or comment, okay?
I can't do this in 30 seconds. When the accessory dwelling unit ZTA was introduced in 2019, it was promoted as a way to provide more affordable, one might even say attainable, housing in neighborhoods where housing was too expensive. It was also said it would enable seniors to stay in their neighborhoods and either live in the main house or rent out the ADU, or live in the ADU and rent out the main house. These are similar arguments that are being made for attainable housing. In a nutshell, people who could not previously afford to live in some neighborhoods through AHSI will now be able to find attainable rents and purchase prices. Yet the county has no information on rents charged by owners of the county's 300 or so plus ADUs, and it's not clear if their numbers are even included in the data on new housing units that the county maintains. So where have these units been built? Are units more affordable? Has the profit and cost of construction per square foot forced rents to be less affordable or attainable? Are seniors living in them? Does the 1 mile walk shed envisioned even make any sense? Are they being used and promoted as they were promoted, or have they become short-term rentals when no one was looking? Before the county leaps into the much deeper pool of AHSI, why not take a look and learn from the experience with ADUs here and see how they might affect what it does with attainable housing, its impact on neighborhoods, residents, and property owners? There are lessons if we just look for them, it seems to me.
To you, Marshai. We're going to go to the other side, and then we'll be back on this side of the room, okay?
It seems like you've done a lot of studies, and I wanted to know, have you done a study on the impact of single-family property values if multifamily units are adjacent to them or across the street?
Just real quickly, I will say that we did reach out to the State Department of Assessments and Taxation, and they've said that in terms of how they assess properties, they wouldn't compare single-family homes to multifamily, a duplex or a triplex, because they're different types of units. But the other thing I just want to point out is that we do have communities around us that already have a lot of mixture of these types of houses. If you just go over the border into Chevy Chase, DC, there are neighborhoods that have duplexes and single-family homes right next to each other, and those are pretty well, high-valued neighborhoods too.
Great, thank you. We're going to actually move on to the next question or comment. I see you had your hand, sir. I'll hand this.
Thank you very much for hosting this listening and learning session. Deeply appreciate it. I'm kind of a visual learner myself, so I actually have a question for the group. For those of you who support, show of hands, no noise, show of hands. For those of you who support this proposal, please raise your hand. That one gentleman here, a couple gentlemen. Okay. For those of you who, and I think representative democracy and listening to voters and taxpayers is important. For those of you in the room who oppose this proposal, show of hands. Oh, I just learned something. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Andrew, for hosting this. I'm Lyric Winnick. I'm a longtime resident. I work and live in the county. I've raised my 2 sons here. I've also devoted 15 years and thousands of hours as a volunteer with MCPS, most recently 3 years as the BCC PTSA president. I'm saddened by the tone that you all took at the beginning here. I really find it disheartening that your choice is to dismiss anyone with concerns and questions about the environment, the infrastructure, the roads, the traffic, the schools, the unintended consequences, the lack of outside studies, and hidden costs, as somehow coming to this process with ill intent. I have lived in this community for a long time. I have advocated for all kinds of families here. We are a caring, compassionate, generous, and welcoming community. You all walked in and passed the BCC Cares Pantry. This school right here has 27% farm students. Every week, parent volunteers serve hundreds of students in a food and necessities pantry with dignity. So we're very conscious every single day here of the need for affordable housing. Attainable housing is not affordable. I am very concerned that the vast majority of the residents in this county are unaware of this plan or its details. 6 listening sessions in 3 weeks is not enough. Every community and residential neighborhood should have received direct communication. They should have been offered an in-person briefing and a question and answer in multiple languages where necessary. Instead, only if you live in an extremely well-informed and active local area with a proactive means to request a briefing from the planning board do you have access to this information. That is neither equity nor inclusion. You have an obligation for a process that will impact 82% of the single-family homeowners to go and find them and reach them and talk to them. You're going to hear lots of people tonight, you already have, who will be very passionate. I think part of the problem is that we seem to have a misalignment of how we define community. One of the council members has stated that residents do not quote-unquote own their communities. I don't think any of us actually starts from that premise. We're not talking about owning a community. We're talking about relationships. The people here are what make the communities, not profit motives. When you prioritize density and market price housing in this area, the only thing you're going to get are tightly packed, multi-million-dollar homes that are going to squeeze out more people. Quite frankly, I'm one of them. Montgomery County is one of the most expensive places to live in the nation. The cost estimates range from $138 to $180 above the baseline national average. And I'm just writing right now my property tax, my insurance, my utilities, my maintenance costs. It's staggering. I work full-time, 7 days a week. My neighbors will tell you I'm a single parent to 2 boys, and I can't take it anymore with the costs. Some bill cycles, I bite my nails. That is before ever making a down payment on a house or paying a mortgage. Part of the affordability issue in this county is the carrying costs of owning a home. But now, by this approach, you've also made it incredibly exhausting to live here. Rather than start this process by reaching out to include and collaborate with our county's many talented residents to seek their ideas, expertise, and desire to be helpful and come together to solve these problems, you've chosen to present this as largely a done deal and legitimate concerns as wrong. That's why this room feels like a battle. If you, as public servants, do not change course, the question will not be, how can people live here, but why would anyone want to? Please press pause.
Let me just quickly... Just to quickly respond, first of all, few people have done more for this school community than you have, so Thank you for that. I applaud and appreciate you, and I know you know that, and I hope you know that. No one is dismissing the concerns that you raised. We are literally here to talk about them. This isn't a done deal. We are here to listen and to hear from you. If this were a done deal, there would be legislation before the council. This would be a public hearing, and we'd be going through the legislative process. We are not. We're before legislation is even before the county council. Many of the concerns, the infrastructure-related concerns especially that you raised, are legitimate. We have talked about them at most of the listening sessions, frankly, all of the listening sessions that we've been at. Each and every question, comment that comes up is being logged by our team, is being aggregated, put together, and it will be presented to the council as part of this process. So no one is dismissing your concern. No one is dismissing any of the concerns that are here, and I just want to be very clear about that. And I have not presented this as a done deal. I understand that is how it has been presented, and that there was a vote that's taking place, and that this is imminent, and things are happening very quickly. That is not accurate. That is not accurate information, and we are here tonight literally to hear about the very concerns that you raised, which I appreciate you sharing.
Thank you for explaining that, Council President. I see some hands on this side of the room. We're making our way around. I have you here. I'll give this to you. You can have a comment.
I would hope that people who speak will give their names. I totally agree with the last speaker. I perceive her to have been an activist in this area. I don't know her name. My name is Deborah Vollmer. I'm one of these retired folks that's living in a house, a lovely older house built in the 40s, and with old growth trees in my yard. And my concern is losing the environment, losing the trees, losing the wildlife, losing the birds, the squirrels, the rabbits, all of the wildlife. I'm really concerned about that. And I also appreciate a need for making some housing more affordable so that the people who serve our communities who don't have inherited wealth can live in Montgomery County. But I think this plan is a non-starter. I would also note, I live in the town of Chevy Chase. We have a local government. We don't have, quote, zoning authority, but we do have authority over floor area ratio and heights and such matters as that. I'm concerned about the county overriding what local governments can do. So I would like a response to that particular issue, and I see a lot of people want to speak, so I'll sit down now.
Yeah, thank you, Deborah. One of the issues that came up during the briefings and during our similar briefings at the Planning, Housing, and Parks Committee related to the governor's housing package, which also has some elements of added density within certain proximity to transit, among other aspects, is the question of municipal authority over those issues. There are certain municipalities like the town of Chevy Chase that have the ability to regulate certain aspects of single-family homes only, but no other zoning authority, and we are working on getting clarification on that. The goal that has been put forward is to not change the authority based on what can be built related to floor area ratio, height, setbacks, et cetera, for a local government, et cetera, based on the recommendations that have been put forward. It's a question of within what is built, essentially the question of can it be a multi-unit or a single unit structure? Is it, if you're knocking down an 1,800 square foot unit, can you build a 4,500 square foot home? And should that be only a single family home, or could it be either a single family home, for instance, or a duplex? Currently, municipality is very clear that in the tear down, they have the regulatory authority to dictate floor area ratio if it's torn down to be a single family home. The question is if it's torn down to be built as a duplex, if that's permitted based on these recommendations, if it ultimately, some aspect of it goes through. And that's something that we're seeking state guidance, and there may be in interest, I know, from the town of Chevy Chase among some other municipalities to clarify that aspect under state law.
Good evening. My name is Lou Evangelista, and I am the resident of the great town of Chevy Chase with my neighbor, Deborah. And I want to say that I'm not a graphics guy. I'm a data guy. I'm a detail guy, and I think this presentation needs some real-world examples. Down my street on Walsh and West Avenue, there was a small cottage torn down, which was sold for $1.3 million, and 3 townhouses were built, each one for $3.5 million. Now tell me if that's attainable or not. You don't have a definition of attainable housing. You want naturally occurring attainable housing. I was at a meeting at the library, Morella Library, on this same subject. And I have another example. A recent flyer on 4915 Cumberland Avenue in Chevy Chase, an existing home is for sale, $3,850,000. The next street, a tear down, a new home, 4815 Cumberland Avenue, is for $4,950,000. Tear down $1 million more, and if you look at the picture, they're comparable in size. So I think before we go any further with your somewhat Pollyanna objectives, you got to put the real world in and find out what the developers want. And I think your proposal is mostly pro-development. Now, I shouldn't complain because my property value has just gone through the roof. If I could take my house down and build 3 townhouses for $10 million, I'd make about $7 million. So I shouldn't complain, but I am, because your proposals are not fair to us in the R60 and R40. I'll end with one question, this is a factual question. You call us exclusionary in zoning. That's offensive, number one. Number two, you treat R200 more favorably than the R60 and R40. I saw on the slide, the R200 would be able to have duplexes only and triplex and quadruplex only in priority housing area. Whereas R40 and R60 would have duplex and triplex by right and only quadplexes if they were in a priority housing. Why? R200 are bigger lots than R60 and R40. So why are we being put on the other side where we're going to be facing higher density as we have already faced in all of Bethesda when you're raising the cap from 30 million to 32 million square feet?
Okay, thank you. I'm going to ask Jason to respond to the actual question why there was a difference in the recommendation of the planning board related to R200.
Thank you. Yeah, that's a good question. It's one that we've heard before. The key thing about the R200 is that those tend to be further out. They're not really focused on the corridors. And in Thrive, the intention is over the coming generations that we want to be able to focus our growth along our corridors where we have multiple modes of transportation and we have more complete communities with a mix of uses. And so where the R200 is, it's further out. And so that's why we said only the triplexes and the quadplexes on those corridors.
Great, thank you for the explanation. Just a hands up, I'm going to make my way up there and all the way back there, but we have a question here. We can limit to 30 seconds just so we can get to as many people as possible. Thank you.
I just want to be quick, but before I begin, Marshawn and Jordan, thank you guys for doing this and Steph. Real quick, just a process question, because I think everybody here in the community wants a full and fair process. You mentioned no legislation going on right now. In the event that there is a need to legislate, will you commit tonight to issue and ensure that a draft, like discussion draft of that legislation, would be released 30 days prior to introduction for any legislation that's required here for this.
I can't speak to whether or not there will be a draft for public discussion 30 days before introduction, because ultimately something has to be introduced, and that's part of the legislative process. There will be at least 30 days, and must be at least 30 days, between what is introduced and the public hearing, and I will commit that there won't be a committee work session or any beginning of the legislative workup process before the public hearing occurs, which is no less than 30 days by law. Same goal, I think, but committing to something that I can actually control.
My name is Shahida Sultan. I live on Sangamore Road. I'm a first-generation immigrant to this country and proudly bought a little Rambler on Sangamore Road so that my kids could go to Whitman and could go on to college and professional degrees. To blame me for the fact that now that investment has gone up to, you say, $1 million is unfair, because it's the biggest solid investment I made after listening to people's advice. Don't buy a condo, don't be a renter, buy a little house all to yourself. That's what I did. And now you're going to punish me by having duplexes and triplexes built around me so that my little Rambler looks like a service quarters.
I'm going to take some up front, and we will make our way back there. We didn't forget about y'all, so I'll hand the mic to you, your name and where you live again.
Michael DeLong from Silver Spring. Thanks for doing this. Quick comment and a question. First off, I know how housing costs have been going up. I recently bought a home, so I strongly support building more duplexes, triplexes, small apartment buildings, even larger ones. And I think that would make homeownership a lot more affordable for people. And so my question is, what can you tell us about the people who would benefit from these smaller homes? Would they be like people who are middle income, lower income? Would it promote racial equality as well?
I think a key thing to keep in mind here is that it's going to be relative to each neighborhood, right? So when you look at those percentages of households today that can afford to live in each neighborhood, and you see how little it is, the idea here is to try to reverse that trend, to create more units that are going to be much smaller than the single-family home that would otherwise be replacing an existing single-family home, so that they will be more affordable than that, and that we can reverse that trend of our neighborhoods becoming harder and harder to be able to purchase it.
Hi, my name is Hillary. I just wanted to, first of all, say thank you for holding this. I graduated from WJ in 2000, and I moved back to Montgomery County recently. And Jason, I just want to say thank you so much for highlighting the zip code 20814, because that's exactly where I moved. And in fact, I live in the R200 zone now, and I live less than a mile from the Grosvenor Metro. And my son and my husband walk to Ashburn Elementary School along Old Georgetown Road every single day. We have opted out of the bus. So you want to take this presentation and you got to go to the WJ cluster and you explain to WJ why there are 3,200 students in there, there are 16 portables there, Ashburton has a permanent portable classrooms there, and nothing is being done. This plan is going to increase utilization of our schools, decrease MCPS money. If you guys are mad about this, I suggest you take a look at the sister plan, the GIP, that also provides tax breaks to corporate developers. They are excluding impact fees on a variety of housing that you guys are upset about, and that money will directly affect MCPS's budget. So if you are mad that your children are going to schools with portables, with black mold, with no HVAC systems, with elementary schools that have 900 students, with high schools that have 3,200, with the Northwood that doesn't have an auditorium and they don't have playing fields. Don't let your county council vote for the GIP. They need to increase impact fees, reduce the exemptions that they're proposing for the corporate developers, because if these corporate developers are able to turn around and donate money to our county council members, they don't deserve a tax break.
Let's try to be respectful for the next person so we can get as many people as we can. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Tamara Nicholson, and I'm a realtor in the area. I'm sure many people do not want to hear from me, but my big thing here is, have you talked to any realtors? Because what I can tell you in my world, and I pore over these numbers all the time, is that real estate is about speculation, and that with speculation comes a devaluation at some point. There's always an 18-year cycle. Did anybody explain about an 18-year cycle in the real estate world? It's not always exactly 18 years, it's an average. But we can expect in the next 2 years there will be a market crash. And we can expect that housing values will lower. In addition to that, we can also expect that we'll have a lot of people who are boomers right now that are not going to be able, not going to be in their homes. I know many people who are, many houses that are empty because the people aren't quite ready to get rid of it. Most of it has to do with paying federal taxes. They don't want to get rid of their house without having, when they have to pay full capital gains tax when both parties are still living. I mean, what would happen if we got rid of for 2 years capital gains tax? I mean, that would open up a lot of properties that people could then either renovate. Most people don't want to buy a house that hasn't been renovated in 30 years. So that's why we need the builders. It's like, it's a whole huge cycle that you're not really considering in your plan, I'm really sorry to say. So I think that if I want to make sure that you're including people who are on the ground in your, in your task force so that you can make some decisions that are, really going to not kick people in the butt. Like, this woman who said that she had a cottage, that nobody's going to want to buy it. The truth is that people aren't going to want to buy it because it's not renovated. So what can the state do to help people like that, to keep their properties, more updated, or to help, and then if they're more updated, people will want to then be able to, buy them at a lower price.
Hello, Kevin Broderick from Section 5, Chevy Chase Jail, Section 5. I have an analytic point. I was very dismayed to hear the responses, so-called responses from the planning board to listening sessions. So when I was in elementary school, we were always instructed to show our work. So where is the work or analysis in the planning board plan? Providing a series of unsupported conclusions does not show your work. The inability to show your work implies that your work product is not supported by analysis. Where is the planning by the planning board? What's the central point here that some of us have thought about? As Mark Ehrlich pointed out, what is the connection between the problem that you cite, everybody agrees those problems are real, and the remedy that you propose? What you're hearing from everybody is that the remedy you propose causes problems in a variety of areas that you're going to hear about in more excruciating detail after me. So is there a connection between the problem and the remedy, or is this simply a roadmap for developers to disrupt the unique character of our community? And let me ask my community to not have applause between speakers, because you're limiting the amount of time that these people want to hear from. And maybe somebody else will say it again after me. So I'm just going to cite a couple of evidentiary things, and then I'm going to move on in my 20 seconds. Where's the evidence that schools, environmental concerns, fire safety, parking can be successfully addressed? What will be the impact on taxes? Where is the analysis? What we read in the I'm Hearing You blog, or whatever it was called, and the blog that followed was really insulting to the intelligence of the community. I found that very unsatisfying. Again, your main problem is do the analysis, do the work, show your work, show a connection between the remedy and your problem. And I dare say, based on people who are smarter than I am, who've looked at this, you're gonna find that this remedy does not work for how many reasons do you want to count? Thank you.
Thank you for that comment. The next person is here. Okay, your name and where you live in the county. Thank you.
Yes, as Mark Ehrlich, our elected county executive, has pointed out, but he is powerless to veto this, this plan is counterproductive. He has shown very convincingly that it will not produce attainable priced housing. The new housing that will go up will be fantastically high priced. It's self-defeating and it's illogical. Maybe everybody is in favor of attainable priced housing. This is going to drive it in the opposite direction.
Hi, thank you for the opportunity to express our concerns and comments. I would just like to talk about some statistics that were presented by you all up front about, one, the percentage of single-family housing. So my question on that for you is, townhomes are counted generally as single-family housing, but you consider them alternate forms of housing. So I think, as someone mentioned, we need more data, and we're not really getting accurate data. So are single-family homes townhouses? Are townhouses single-family homes? And how does that play into the overall housing stock numbers that you're giving us? The other thing is you talk about multifamily housing prices being much lower than single-family housing, which without ever discussing the fact that it's due to demand. I mean, price and demand are one and the same. So how do you say, well, the cost is going to go down for single-family housing if we build more multifamily housing? That's just not how it works. The other point you brought up was teachers and firemen leaving, you know, the close-in areas or not being able to live near the schools or the fire departments where they work. So my question is, have you gone to those teachers and have you gone to the firemen and the policewomen and have you said, do you want to live in a single-family home or do you want to live in a quadplex? And what is their answer? Because my guess, you know, and this is just a guess of mine, this isn't based on data because we don't really have any data to support any of this up. The question, and you know, what I would say is, are they moving out because they want to find a quadplex further out that they can afford? Or are they moving out because they want a single family home and likely detached that they can afford? Thank you.
Yeah, I just want to, you raise a lot of points. I'm not going to go one by one on those. We'll make sure that our staff takes down all of those questions, concerns, and comments. The one specific point that you did raise that's important about the presentation, how things are classified. A townhome is considered a single-family attached in the code. A single-family home, as is being discussed here, is considered single-family detached. I don't know if there's anything you want to add to that, but I just want to clarify, they're both single-family homes as, you know, under the code, but there's a different classification for single-family attached, which is a townhome, or single-family detached, which is a single-family home on one lot. Hopefully that clarifies that aspect.
What is your statistic represent? Thank you.
I'll turn it to Jason to share what the data was based on with that clarification.
So the 180,000 or so, and I'm looking at our housing expert over here, Lisa Gavoni from the Planning Department. I believe that is the single-family detached number that we have. And we probably have about 20% of our housing stock, is that right? Of the housing stock. Yeah. 20% of the housing stock is townhouse in the county today. 47% detached, 22% townhouse.
Great, thank you for that explanation. We have another question here. Your name and where you live in the county, please.
I'm Darrell Anderson. I've lived on Daniel Road in Chevy Chase for 33 years. Daniel Road is between Connecticut Avenue and 16th Street. It's Jones Bridge Road extended southward, except that we're one block off of Beach Drive. I want to, my comment is in the same vein as the person who talked about the impact on the schools. It's astonishing to me that I didn't hear a word about the impact on traffic. Daniel Road, in the 33 years that I've there, has been destroyed by traffic. The development in Chevy Chase Lake and Connecticut Avenue and elsewhere along north of East-West Highway there has funneled traffic through our neighborhoods to the point where Daniel Road is dangerous. Much of this is due to the closure of Beach Drive, but it's not just that, it's the development. And I don't know if you can get Beach Drive opened up, but regardless, if with more development of the sort you're describing, funneling more people through our neighborhoods will destroy more neighborhoods. It is dangerous to walk on my street. I have to wait to cross Daniel Road. This is the Rollingwood section of Chevy Chase that's purely residential. I have to wait to cross the street. It's as if I'm crossing Connecticut Avenue. When my wife takes our grandchild out for a stroller, I'm terrified. So good luck.
Hi, Richard Clay, 3917 Woodbine Street, Chevy Chase. There are a lot of factors that one takes into consideration when buying a property. Location, a lot of other things. But one of the most important is zoning. You are changing the zoning of an area that everybody who bought in that area thought they were going to be in an area of single-family houses. A change in zoning should be the last consideration of any governmental agency.
Okay, thank you. Your name and where you live in the county.
Thank you for hosting this session. My name is Chris. I've got a senior at BCC, so really appreciate all this. I do want to talk about school crowding. So in BCC today, the cafeteria can only fit 50% of the kids who are eligible for farms. Kids have to sit on the floor of the school bus to get to school today. Classrooms have up to 40 kids at times. Classrooms go without desks. I understand there are plans in place for new schools and rezoning. However, there's been a highly ineffective level of communication between planning and MCPS as in regards to this. And I'm sorry for being so direct, but historically, they've had colossal failures bordering on incompetence when it comes to the relationship between planning and MCPS. I have zero confidence that anything planned here is going to be well thought out, flushed out, and make MCPS more competitive. So I'd like you to pause this plan. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Rick Dodd. I don't live in Chevy Chase. I live in Woodacres, right across from the gentleman who lives in Springfield, who's on the planning board. I am not an architect, but for 20 years, I have been on a committee that's safeguarded the uniformity of 450 homes in Woodacres, and it concerns me for other architecturally distinct neighborhoods like Carderock, in other places in Bethesda, that there's supposed to be a book, a plan book, or what is it called?
Pattern book.
A pattern book. And I'm wondering if it's a one-size-fits-all book, or if it's going to be developed in consultation with neighborhoods that actually have concerns that the sort of four townhome or multiplex that might pass in Gaithersburg or in Germantown is certainly not going to pass in our neighborhood is anything but an aberration.
Thank you for that comment. I am making my way up the room, and we will come up there to the balcony. If you can tell me your name and where you live in the county and your comment.
Hi, my name is Jenny Wilson. I am a lifelong Montgomery County resident. My entire family on both sides has lived in Montgomery County for a long, long time, way up in Sandy Spring, which is not part of this plan. I now live in Chevy Chase, Maryland, and I'd like to kind of just highlight what I'm hearing as a common theme among a lot of the people here. What I'm hearing is that this feels like a one-size-fits-all plan for a huge swath of the county that's so different in so many different places. You can go up the stretch of Connecticut Avenue that you're calling one of the main corridors, and it's wildly different block to block. So, echoing, what everyone's saying here, I'd like to highlight a quote from Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and Tina Smith. They were recently writing in the New York Times on affordable housing, which this plan is not, but I think it still applies here. They said, "We know that housing looks a lot different in Minnesota than in the Bronx. It shouldn't be a one-size-fits-all approach. They are proposing a progressive housing bill to fight the housing crisis that," I quote, "aims to develop homes that blend seamlessly into the landscape of the town and fit the needs of the people living them." I think we can all agree that it would be outrageous to claim that every single person in Montgomery County has the same needs, that every single community in Montgomery County has the same needs. That would be a disservice to all of us. It would be a disservice to every single resident here. So I'm begging the council, do the hard work of figuring out what every single community in this county needs, because it's not going to be the same. Duplexes might make sense in one place. An apartment might make sense in another, but it's not all going to be the same. And I think what you're also missing is we need to be talking about more than just adding houses. More houses doesn't equal community. A community is so much more than that. It's green spaces. It's schools that can fit all the children. It's less traffic. I would like anyone who has sat in Connecticut Avenue traffic trying to get from DC to the Beltway and tell me how long you sat there. Did you have a good podcast? I hope so, because I guarantee it took a long time. So any plan that doesn't take into account all of the things that make up specific communities throughout this beautiful county that we have is irresponsible. So again, I'm begging you, do the work, because this is not the work.
My name is Blythe Albert. I have lived in my 3-bedroom, 2-bath Rambler about 3 blocks from Brookville Market for 40 years. My kids went here to BCC, raised my children here, and what drew me to the community was the diversity in housing. So I understand the want for diversity in housing. What my point is, and it's going to be a short one, is I can give you a fact. There is a 3-bedroom duplex that was built in close proximity to Trader Joe's off Wisconsin Avenue, and each unit is going for $3.6 million. You tell me that that's attainable housing. That's what's going to happen, because the market will drive the price. We all know that. We are in a market-based economy. Real estate is a market-based asset, and it will drive the price. So don't talk to me about attainable housing. I think that's a misnomer.
Thank you. We are making our way around. I have somebody here, your name and where you live in the county, and a brief comment.
Peggy Dennis. I live in Potomac, so I would not be affected by any of these considerations. But as past president of the Montgomery County Civic Federation, I have 2 constructive suggestions that would create a whole lot of very affordable housing while building community. The first is establishing an office of home sharing facilitator. There are thousands of us aging baby boomers we're rattling around in big houses. We have room to spare, but how do we find a tenant who we know will be safe and who we can get along with? We need a facilitator to help home sharing. Second suggestion, a law that you could call it homes for people, not profiteers. Outlaw the selling of homes to real estate investment trusts, LLCs, or any other entity that would buy up a home and turn it into an Airbnb or rent it out at outrageous prices.
Thank you, Peggy. I just quickly, the home sharing program, we did launch a home sharing program. It stalled a bit during COVID because of obvious concerns about home sharing during the pandemic, and it is something that the county has looked into and that the council and the executive have worked on, and I agree with you, need to continue to work on it. In terms of the selling of homes and restrictions on the selling of homes, it's not a county issue, it's a state issue. Maybe there are some legal concerns of how much you can restrict and what impacts those restrictions would have. For instance, if your home goes into an estate, for instance, for estate planning reasons, that is a business entity, similarly. But there was a bill that didn't get formally approved at the state level to try to address that. My understanding is it may come back. It is something that the state is looking at and interested in. A lot of us are concerned about who is buying up homes and whether or not homes are being purchased by people. And it is something that we on the council have worked with the state to think through. So I appreciate that comment. And on the aspect of Potomac, I don't know if you want to speak to the county, what is included and where. I think that's an important point, so you should speak to that.
Sure. I would just say, I don't know exactly where you live, but there are certain parts of Potomac that are included in this. The idea was that we didn't want to say that this is something that one particular part of the county only should have to take on, but the challenge of overcoming our housing crisis is something that we need to collectively take on across the county, so not just one part of the county versus another.
Okay, great, thank you. We have another person here, Marshia, somebody on that side of the room. There we go.
Oh, thank you. Jenny Sue Dunner, and I live in Chevy Chase. I wanted to mention to you that I think it's very important that we do not disenfranchise a good portion of our county, because there are people who want to have the option to live in a single-family neighborhood. And this proposal is basically, if it would be filled at the end of the day, it would be really a destruction to all single-family neighborhoods by changes. Now, the changes you all may obviously like, but I don't think that the public will like them. And I have an issue with how this has been presented. I'm an old-timer, and there was a time over the years that there were advisory groups, and they represented all factions of Montgomery County. And they sat down and they looked at the issues and they came to conclusions. Maybe not all that we would want, but at least they did it in a fair and open way. We have really been presented with a complete package here, and it was moving very, very fast until the public decided to take notice. And that public still is not really well informed. It's because there are a lot of activists across the county that are informing the public, and they're going to continue to inform the public. And remember, they're not just concerned, they're voters. And I think you all should take a good think about that.
Thank you for that comment.
Jenny, so I did just want to speak to one aspect of that. You know how much I care and how much affection I have for you. But to speak to one point here, the reason why we're having this listening session is this is the process that we set forth before the public was even responding to recommendations, before recommendations even came to us. We had 3 briefings at the council, public briefings at the council, and before we moved forward on any of those briefings, before we made any decisions, before any legislation was introduced, these 5 listening sessions, including virtual in communities across the county, were set up. Not because they were demanded by the public, not because there were angry people who were demanding that this occur, because this was the intentional, unprecedented outreach in a process that we decided to set up because we wanted to hear from you. So I don't think it's fair to say that the only reason why this meeting is happening is because the public found out and they demanded this. This meeting is happening, and more people in the public are aware of the plan because we have presented it and because we want to hear from you. All we have now, as mentioned, are recommendations that have come from the planning board. The council hasn't even begun its formal legislative work, and we're hearing from you as part of that process, as part of an intentional approach that began at the outset of how we were going to take up these recommendations.
Great, thank you, Council President. We have a couple questions here, and then we'll make our way around.
Hi, my name is Aiden Larson, and I live in North Bethesda, Maryland currently, and I'm a little scared to say this in this room, but I am strongly in favor of this plan. Thank you. I grew up in single-family homes in Kensington and Bethesda, and it was great. I liked it. I live in a townhome now, and it's also great, and I love having my own townhome, even if it's not a single-family home, and I want more people to have that opportunity. I think there are many benefits of allowing more types of housing at more price points throughout the county, but I just like to focus on the fact that it would let more people live in our wonderful county. It's a very safe county, it's a very diverse county. We support LGBTQ rights, we support abortion rights, and we should be really proud and happy that more people want to live here in this great county. So thank you.
Do you need
Jordan,
yeah,
on this side.
okay. Thanks for having us this evening. We have no confidence in Montgomery County planning or the planning process. Your policy proposals are based on incomplete and inaccurate data. Do you know how many housing units are already in the pipeline? We have heard that over 10,000 units are already permitted, and there are 31,000 more within municipality master plans. That's enough to house however more people are supposed to move to the county by 2050. Meanwhile, there's an exodus of population from the county because of the lack of jobs. This is a developer's dream. We need jobs, and developers are just thrilled and rubbing their hands at what they're looking at right now. However, there's also, why don't we try a trial? What about White Flint? What about Geico? There's big spaces that are open. What about some of the shopping centers that they've talked about? Use that as a trial. Don't invade already established single-family neighborhoods. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we have a brief comment over here. Your name and where you live in the county.
My name is So-Ching Tsai. I live in the town of Somerset in Chevy Chase. I would like to echo some of the points made earlier, is that how does your proposal fit into the Montgomery County master plan? And as the previous speaker pointed out, there are 30,000 units already, housing units that have already been approved but not yet built. And then secondly, in the projection of house population growth and housing unit growth, there is going to be a gap of housing units exceeding the population growth by 2030. So I want to know if you have consulted those, the county master plan. Secondly, I also want to echo an earlier speaker's point. Yes, you in places with, where single-family homes are being torn down and replaced with larger homes. If you turn that into duplex or multifamily unit housing, a developer is not, who's building a $3-4 million homes in my neighborhood is not going to be satisfied with building 4 units at $1 million each. What the developer will build, what we see as an opportunity, is building maybe 4 units at $2 million each. Is that affordable? Is that attainable housing? So these are the questions I'd like to pose to you.
Thank you. Rashai, to you.
Okay, we have a question here.
Hi, I'm Dave Johnson. I live in Chevy Chase. And I think this whole process needs more democracy. You have listening sessions, but I really don't think that you hear our voices. We have no voice over choosing authoritarian ZTA over thoughtful master plan. Decisions as to multiplexes or apartment buildings are by right, eliminating any voice from those affected. And only you, just 11 people in the county, get to vote. This project involves all citizens living in targeted communities, 82% of the county. And we have no vote as to what happens to us, This is far too big and far too important for us not to have a vote. This plan, this plan, whatever you eventually present, should be on the ballot. We're all affected. We're all affected will have a voice in the future of their communities. So instead of only you voting for the ZTA, you should give the vote to the people with a plebiscite. That's a better democratic process. Thank you very much.
Okay. We have another comment on this side of the room. A quick comment, your name and where you live in the county. Please, let's be respectful for everybody. Thank you. We have a question.
Hello, my name is Jim Olson. My wife and I have lived in Glen Echo Heights for 23 years. We had 3 kids go through the Whitman cluster of schools. And I am strongly in favor of the Attainable Housing Initiative. It would be a modest but useful step to help alleviate the severe shortage of housing that is both a local and national problem. Even my home state of California has now realized that and is taking steps to help alleviate the problem. In particular, I hear from fellow parents of MCPS grads, people in our social circle, that their kids, while gainfully employed, cannot afford to live anywhere remotely close to where they grew up. Adding duplexes or triplexes to the housing mix or small apartments in areas close to transit would be a useful step in dealing with this situation. In my own built-out neighborhood of Glen Echo Heights, that could mean that some of the frequent teardowns might be replaced by duplexes instead of a monoculture of $2.5 to $3 million McMansions. And I'd also say that if you read there's this fear I hear often tonight that these duplexes would not fit into a neighborhood. I think the planning board has actually done a very good job with their proposed pattern book to ensure that such new construction would be compatible with existing single-family housing. And I hear some dissent there. Let me just say, personal thing. During COVID, my wife and I did a walk hundreds of times down from our neighborhood through Brookmont to the canal and back, looped around to our house. And after doing that a couple hundred times, one day I was by myself and I noticed that one of the houses we passed actually had 2 street numbers. It was a duplex. I had not noticed it for a year and a half. And then I went back, told my wife that, and she went out by herself the next day, and she came back from walk the same route and said, you're wrong. That wasn't a duplex. That was a triplex, because she found there was another part of the house with a street number behind the other part of the house. So we had a triplex. We hadn't even noticed it, even though we're, sort of look at housing stuff. We're interested in it. And it seems to me that Brookmont does remain a highly desirable neighborhood despite its triplex. Thank you.
All right, thank you. We have a question on this side.
Hi, my name is Amy, and I'm in the Parkwood neighborhood, which is a little bit of Bethesda and Kensington. And believe me, it is not a walkable neighborhood. It will not work as a 15-minute city, which is what I've seen in one of your blogs. I have 3 short things. You mentioned the timing, and I think it is important that people are upset. I had on good authority from a top official that you are thinking of doing something in October. No, hear me out. In one of your planning documents, it says, maybe it was wrong, but it says this fall. But then in this huge 98-page report, it says, to my surprise, Thrive has not yet been adopted by council, and AHS will not be taken up by the County Council until Thrive Montgomery 2050 is adopted. So just know that it'd be really good to clear that up. Number two, in your document, it says that it will not affect the character of the neighborhood because it will be so incremental. And you point out how even at 30% of the possibilities, it's just a here and here. Well, that's just one 5-year period, one 10-year period. We're going to be living in these neighborhoods for 50 years. It's like the frog in the boiling water. You put it in, and it's cold at the time, it doesn't notice. But eventually, the water's going to be boiling, and it's going to be dead, and that's what's going to happen to our neighborhoods. And then let me say, when people like me signed a contract for, let's say, $500,000 with a mortgage firm to buy a single-family house, not only did I sign that contract, but we also signed a contract with the government to keep the character of my neighborhood intact. Thank you.
Yeah, I appreciate all the comments and the questions. I did just want to clarify, the council did approve Thrive, so that has happened. I'm not sure the document that you were referencing.
It's on page 62 in the 98-page document.
Yeah, I think it was the inclusion of a prior memo and a prior document, but we can follow up with you and check on that. And as far as the timing, I can't speak to who had authority, high-ranking official. I can tell you that the only people that have authority on what gets introduced at the council is the county council, and anybody who suggests otherwise is just not accurate. So I can't speak to anybody else who suggested the timeline, but there are council members here. I'm the president of the county council, and I am telling you right now that the information that you had on the introduction isn't accurate and wasn't accurate when you heard it.
Great, thank you for that explanation. We do have a lot of people here. We're trying to get to as many people as we can, so I do see your hands up there. Sir, your name and where you live in the county, okay?
Yeah, I got one very simple solution to solve it. It's working in Orange County, LA, Los Angeles. Instead of building one house, they built 6 or 7 units. And there are many, many buildings like that, right near Disneyland. We have 2 or 3 of them there. And county does help tremendously. The way county helps is they do not raise property taxes. They do not go based on value. So what happens is we can maintain the rents very reasonable. I have buildings, nobody moves over there. And the people are living there 10 years, 15 years. I have not seen anybody here. The problem here is I have one house here and the guy would not pay rent. It took me 24 months to get him out. It's not easy. The rules are very different. And the same area in LA County, Orange County, you can build 12, 13 units and keep the rents reasonable. Believe me or not, it works.
All right, thank you. We have a question on this side.
We want to be respectful for everybody. 5 seconds.
Yeah, 5 seconds. Look, take a look at Miami, take a look at San Francisco, right? San Francisco has stifled zoning. It's not doing too well. Miami has allowed zoning changes. It has the 2 of the most expensive zip codes in the country, right? So look into zoning changes. It's not a bad thing, okay?
We are willing to help. We have lots of land here.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much.
The problem is they do not have sewer.
Yes, sir. We're going to go to the next person. Thank you so much. Rashai, to you. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Maggie Brooks. I live in the Springfield neighborhood of Bethesda, where there are hundreds of townhouses and apartments, including MPDUs, under construction now. That aside, my question is kind of a granular financing one. I noticed that among the incentives are rebates or refunds on property taxes to those who choose to convert and those who own some of the units, and as well, reduced impact fees to developers. So my question is, with the inevitable increase in school-age population, how will increase in school space and increased school teachers be financed, as well as whatever else impact fees cover?
Okay, thank you for that comment. We have another question over here. Your name and where you live in the county? Oh, did you guys want to comment?
Yeah, I'm going to ask Jason to answer. Just to be clear, just to be clear, there are zoning changes that can occur. Zoning changes can't provide tax breaks or tax incentives as part of zoning. If that were to happen, it would be through separate legislation and separate legislative vehicles. Let me turn it to Jason, and he can speak to any incentives that are recommended or suggested by the planning board that is, again, not being proposed currently by the county council.
Yeah, thank you, Maggie. Maggie's one of my immediate neighbors, and we've lived next to each other for 15 years. We could talk about this more over the weekend. I just want to, with the incentives that were recommended in the board's proposal, really the idea there was just to put out a couple of ideas of if we evaluate this after a few years and take a look at see how much, how many duplexes, triplexes, quadplexes we're getting, what are maybe some of the obstacles to achieving them, or are we seeing more than we thought we would get, and all of that to basically then say, here are some options and things that could be considered to incentivize or try to get more of these in particular neighborhoods. Not something that I anticipate that the council is interested in taking up at this moment. So,
Great, thank you for that explanation. Okay, we're going to move on to the next question or comment. Your name and where you live in the county. Let's be respectful. Thank you.
Thank you. Hi, my name is Maddie Kapoor. I live in Bethesda, about 5 minutes from here. I also grew up about 5 minutes from here. I went to Pyle and Whitman. I have a 1-year-old and a 5-year-old who are also going to go to Bradley Hills, Pyle and Whitman. And I love a lot of things about living in Bethesda. The schools, I think, shaped me to be who I am today, an advocate for justice and fair housing. And I would like everybody to, I think we've gotten really granular here. I would love for everybody to zoom out and think about the unprecedented housing crisis that is happening in our country and in our county, and all of the people who are looking for housing and don't have housing, who aren't able to live in communities like this, in neighborhoods that have the kind of amenities that we have, regardless of the cost, exactly what the cost would be of a duplex or triplex. I know in my neighborhood, it's gonna be way more attainable than a new single-family home that are about 6,000 square feet. I think it would be fine for 2 to 3 families to live in that amount of space. I would also just ask all of my neighbors to really think about personal values. If you think of yourself as somebody that values justice and you're trying to keep people out of your community, I think that that's something that you really have to think about.
Please, let's move.
Guys, let's be respectful, okay? We're going to toss it to the other side of the room
we have a
for another
question
comment.
here.
Thank you. Yes, ma'am. Thank you so much. Okay, we have another question.
All right. Could I just ask any reference, we're going to use parliamentary rules here, reference we, let's and we, include yourself in that of things to consider, not you. So we can ask that and then ask the people not respond to other people making comments about things that we should consider or things that let's do. Okay? Thank you. Let's go to the next question.
My name is Donald Horowitz, and I live in Section 5, very close to Connecticut Avenue, in what's called the buffer zone. Now, for those of you who didn't attend a previous session, a buffer zone is actually the target zone in which apartment buildings may be constructed. And I want to tell you that Thrive, from which this derives, from which all of this derives, it plays quite fast and loose with terminology. And in some cases, you have to turn the words 180 degrees to get the real meaning. I want to assure you that my wife and I are really looking forward to having our house surrounded by 3 or 4 apartment buildings. It's not exactly our ideal. And I must say also, when it comes to the question of whether this is a done deal, think of how the council dealt with Thrive. The council proceeded to fire the entire planning board for various forms of misbehavior, which I can't enumerate. I know what some of the allegations were, but perhaps the president of the council could enlighten us. But it didn't throw out its work product. Now, Thrive, I studied Thrive quite closely, and I actually wrote a rejoinder to it. It can be described as data-free. It can also be described as bias-rich. For example, there's a statement in Thrive that we will build no new roads in the county and we will repair as few as possible. So you have an idea what Thrive thinks of your automobile and what the planning board thinks of your automobile. And the county council proceeded, as soon as it had dismissed the planning board, it proceeded to approve Thrive unanimously. So was this a done deal? Is it a done deal? Well, if you can imagine basing a policy or a law that affects how we will live, and this is rather an arrogant way of putting it, that is to say, the council is attempting to decide how we will live in the future in this community. If you can think of that way, then you really must take a look at Thrive, because its proper terminology, the proper title it should have been put on it is Deprive.
Thank you. Thank you. We have another quick comment here on this side. Your name and where you live in the county, okay?
Richard Hoy. I live in Bethesda. I'm retired from the fire department. My father settled in Bethesda on Norfolk Avenue with the headquarters for his accounting firm years ago, so I call this area my home. I was raised in adolescence in Potomac and went to Churchill High School. I tried out, I played on the football team, council president, who also went to Churchill High School. I am, as I say, I'm a firefighter. I support this plan and seeing how this has played out in other communities, for instance, Arlington County, within the last year that they've had a similar zoning ordinance. They've had something less than 50 permits for multifamily housing under the new zoning law. My concern is that this will be a slow rollout and will need to be incentivized. And I am, as I say, I have my experience in 2 worlds, a world of privilege, being able to live in Potomac and going to Churchill High School, and then as a firefighter, on a firefighter salary, working in the same county and trying to live here. I have never lived in anything but group houses, starting in the rescue squad, where I lived in the dormitory. People still do that around the county. And then in group houses in the neighborhood just beyond the rescue squad. And these houses in Bethesda, these group houses are mostly occupied by groups of researchers from NIH, people who will go on to attain much higher incomes. And they are flooding the market here for what is affordable housing. This plan is attainable housing. It's not affordable housing. It's just one tool in the toolkit that we need to apply. But I think the biggest benefit beyond giving homeowners of a lower income level ability to live in Bethesda is that it changes the sense of agency. And that's what I want to speak to, and I'll be brief from this point on. The sense of agency. Among the firefighters that I have the privilege to have worked with, really no one that I can remember ever gave Bethesda a thought as a place they would live in because of the expense and the exclusivity of the area. This plan changes that dynamic. Now, anyone can look at any neighborhood in Montgomery County and say that, well, with work and with some opportunity and luck, yeah, I could live in that neighborhood, which would give me a different set of values of quality of life that I can put into my calculus of where to live, rather than to move to Frederick and buy as much house as you can. I had the opportunity a number of years ago, and I'll sum up here.
I'm going to have to ask you to wrap up. We have 30 people in line. We have less than 20 minutes left before we have to leave the auditorium.
The benefit of this is that we have different people of different walks of life to share the same space with. And that's essential for our progress as a community.
Yeah, I think so.
All
We
right.
have
If
a
everyone
question
could really keep it to 30 seconds up to this point so we can hear from as many more people as possible. We have about 30 people who have lined up, and we have less than 20 minutes before we have to leave the auditorium
Okay, here we have
so
a
that the
question
team
here.
here can go home for the evening.
My name is Tom Schuler. I live in the Hamlet. First of all, I think it's extraordinarily condescending and disrespectful for us, for the council to allow us to speak for 30 seconds on something that they've been working on for 3.5 years. These concerns are of such extreme change to the zoning regulations that it merits comprehensive review by the constituency. The staff of the planning board, chaired by Artie Harris, who's on the stage, who is an unelected official, has had the audacity to state, and I quote, "The time has come for Montgomery County to break free from outdated zoning that has constrained housing supply, led to skyrocketing real estate prices, and forced many of the county's middle-income population to search elsewhere for housing." The last line of that statement is, "We can no longer afford to devote so much land to so few people." Who is he and who is the council that they believe their idea of social engineering is so much better than our own thoughts? If you really care so much about this issue as a real issue, and I'm talking to the council, an issue that has much conflicting data and information that you presented here, if you believe so much, why not an open forum to really dig into these issues, not a 30-second listening session? This is a radical change that will be the death of single-family communities and does not accomplish your stated formula.
Thank you for that comment. We have one here. 30 seconds, guys. We have a long line. Thank you. Your name and where you live.
Hi there, I'm Leanne Tobias from Bethesda, and my question is the following. Everything I've read about the housing shortage in this area has talked about a housing shortage linked to affordability. So, two questions. Number one, is that erroneous? That was something that was said by the Metropolitan Washington Council of Governments, which stated that 75% of the new housing that should be built in this area should be affordable. And so I'd like to know if that's the case, if you agree that that's the case. And secondly, if that is the case, why are we not hearing about proposals that focus on affordability, such as trying to convert underutilized office space in the county to multifamily units?
Yeah, just to quickly respond, we're doing all of those things too, including looking at converting office to residential. It's very complicated and happens on a very limited basis. We have made historic investments and done a number of other things and are looking at a lot of other programs on affordability. It is not erroneous. Most housing experts, including COG, have identified the fact that there is a housing shortage at every level of affordability. High-level costs, mid-level costs, low-level costs, deeply affordable workforce housing and market-rate housing. Most experts would suggest that there is not nearly enough housing, period. That is the response to your question, but I appreciate the question.
Okay.
Thank you. I'm so sorry. We have a lot of people. Thank you.
All right, I'll take a question this side, Jordan.
Hi, thank you. I'm Karen Bolte with the Wildwood Manor Citizens Association in Bethesda. WMCA is very concerned that the AHSI will adversely impact our quality of life by increasing population density that will harm the environment, place severe strains on critical infrastructure, further overcrowd our schools, and exacerbate traffic congestion, among other negative impacts. County Executive Elrich agrees that the AHSI is a bad idea for Montgomery County. The most glaring problem with the AHSI is the failure of the planning department to conduct impact studies on the likely effects of the initiative on the environment, our aging infrastructure, schools, transportation, and adequate public facilities and services. Instead, the planning board simply states that, quote, impacts on infrastructure are likely to be minimal, and impacts on schools will be de minimis. The county council would be derelict in its duties if it were to enact the AHSI's sweeping zoning changes without conducting, analyzing, and considering evidence-based studies of the initiative's expected impacts on the county and its residents' quality of life. Montgomery County needs more affordable housing, not more market rate housing that would be generated under the AHSI. Research has shown that similar upzoning proposals have not resulted in any statistically significant reduction in the cost of housing. Instead of inappropriately bypassing the master and sector planning processes by implementing the AHSI, WMCA urges the County Council to consider implementing more effective ways to address the need for affordable housing. Our concerns and recommendations are detailed in our written comments, which we submitted to the council yesterday. Thank you.
Thank you for submitting them.
Thank you. Our next question here.
Chris Files. I've lived in Chevy Chase for 25 years. I'd like to draw attention to the Planning Commission's record in downtown Bethesda. I'd like to add my voice to a request for more data. 10 years ago, downtown Bethesda was primarily 2 to 4 story buildings, and then we had foisted on us many 20 to 30 story, if not higher, buildings. If the total build-out is done under the master plan, I believe Bethesda will be second only to Baltimore in high-rise buildings. What we've gotten, correct me, I'd like, if I could get an answer, how many buildings over 20 stories have been built since 2014? And am I correct that it's mostly rental housing and it's very expensive? Thank you.
Thank you.
We can follow up with that information specifically.
Yes, thank you, ma'am. To you, Marshai.
Okay, I just want to point out that we have about 10 minutes, so let's keep our questions and comments shorter so we can get.
My name is Catherine Pensler, and I live in the town of Chevy Chase. And I'm kind of astonished that the presentation that you made at the beginning of the session did not give us a clear idea of the corridor of high-rise apartment buildings that are planned all along Connecticut Avenue and Wisconsin Avenue. I think it's really deceptive and wrong that you guys didn't put that out here when you have so many people attending who would be dramatically affected by this. It would tremendously change the character of our neighborhood and would have a massive impact on the infrastructure, everything from water, the schools, sewage, everything, and traffic. Now, when I went to a meeting this summer in the town that was presented by the woman down here to the right of the stage, I expressed my shock and concern about the traffic, and her answer was that anyone living within a mile of the metro won't have a car. Everyone's just going to use the metro.
Okay, thank you for that comment. We have somebody here.
Hi, good evening, everyone. My name's Jeff Sharp. I live 2 blocks that way. Lived here for about 15 years. My eldest kid just graduated from BCC. My youngest is a sophomore here. So I'm actually here to speak as a commercial real estate developer, but also as a neighbor. Right? So what I can tell you, and to be abundantly clear, we don't develop single-family housing. We don't develop duplexes or triplexes or little apartment buildings, which is what we're talking about. I've developed several thousand units in my career, and so I like to think I know what I'm talking about. What I can tell you is that there is a housing shortage. It's not just COG who says that. You can go to the Terwilliger Center for Housing at ULI. You go to Harvard's Joint Center for Housing. There are lots of other places you can go, and the conclusion is very simple. Constrained supply means higher prices, whether you're talking about rentals or for sale. The only way out of that bind is to build more housing, right? Now, we can talk about where it goes. We can talk about what it should look like. We can talk about lot coverage and trees. That's all good. But I want to point out also the implications of not dealing with this, right? Growth is happening in Montgomery County. It can happen here, or it can happen up county, and then all that commuter traffic, which, by the way, is 90% of the cars on Connecticut and Wisconsin Avenue that we all have to deal with, which is a giant pain, that's all commuter traffic. That is much worse with sprawling development than it is with local compact development. So from an environmental perspective, if you're concerned about greenhouse gas emissions, if you're concerned about traffic, if you're concerned about consumption of green space, much better to build close in, even if you don't like the way it looks, right? The other thing I would say is just, so another thing we talk about, homelessness. Greg Clyburn, who's a professor at University of Washington, has studied this issue extensively. If you want to understand the root cause of homelessness, he's done robust statistical analysis that look at what could be driving it. It's not mental illness, it's not drug use, it's not availability of beds, it is housing pricing, right? So if you want to deal with some of these other social issues, you can't do it without building housing. Thank you.
All right, thank you. We'll have a question on this side.
Hi, I'm Cindy Anderson. My husband and I have lived in Chevy Chase for 42 years. I have 3 simple questions that I think you can answer. Now, I didn't understand your answer about Potomac. Why is Potomac and what part of Potomac is not included in this plan? Secondly, well, 2 things. Why have we avoided the master plan process here? And are developers or anybody going to be required to follow the model format, the various suggestions, or are they going to build like they have on Wall Street?
Thank you. Okay.
So just to clarify again here, this is the map of the 4 zones where the recommendations apply, and you can see that there are parts of Potomac that are included in here in yellow. So that's, I will note, if we go back to the last slide, there's a link to our website. From that website, there is an interactive map that you can drill in and you can turn on and off different layers to see how this applies or doesn't apply to different parts of the county. Oh yeah, with the pattern book, that would be a requirement that you would have to abide by the pattern book within for the small scale development, the duplexes and triplexes. Absolutely.
Thank you for that explanation. Jason, we have another question and comment on this side.
Thanks so much. My name is Olga Jose. I'm a resident in the village of North Chevy Chase. I'm also a municipal leader. I serve on the council there as a treasurer. I'm a mom. I was formerly a pediatric critical care nurse, and so I know that kids or any adult hit at 20 miles per hour or more, that is potentially fatal. So forget vision 0 when we're talking about traffic with all the congestion that we will have if this plan is put in place. I'm now working as a public health expert and focus on civil registration, so births, deaths, and I look at all the demographic analyses that you've been doing and talk about needing more skill and ability in presenting the data. Anyhow, I find it interesting that I follow a developer because I find it also interesting that I see stickers that say Montgomery for all, when I truly believe that this is Montgomery for developers. The developer mentioned that he does not build quads and triplexes and duplexes now, but not yet. You will be developing them and making a lot of money because that is what the plan will support. I do support affordable housing, and this is not a plan that talks about affordable housing. From what I saw on Montgomery County websites, a starting salary for a MC bus operator, $51,000. Montgomery County police officer, $69,000. Teachers, $70,000 to $75,000. Jason, you highlight in the presentation that you just gave that it seemed attractive, the townhouse prices of $450,000 relative to homes. Absolutely, when the homes are $1 million. You also mentioned that a typical single-family home in 2000, I'm almost done, was $534, requiring an annual salary of $119,000. So with the salaries I just mentioned, for whom will these homes be affordable or attainable? One moment. You also mentioned that this plan is data-driven. Well, for pedestrians, most pedestrian shed is a quarter of a mile or 5 minutes, not 1 mile that you promote. And you also mentioned that this plan includes social justice. I'd like for you to align your message with Montgomery County House Opportunities Commission that is pushing to sell apartments on River Road to a private developer, despite the remains of 200 Black people buried underneath the parking lot. So you can't pick and choose your social justice.
All right, thank you.
This
We have a
plan
question.
is for developers and not Montgomery for all.
All right, thank you. We have a question.
All right, I do have a quick question, so I would appreciate it if you could please answer it. So as everyone's established here, this area is maxed out, the schools, the infrastructure, the services, and so instead of focusing on adding maybe a few hundred or even 1,000 units in this area, which likely will not address your concerns in terms of creating attainable housing, why are you not focusing on the northwest part of the county where you could thoughtfully plan tens of thousands of units, address your concerns, and likely create an economic boom for that part of the county?
Thank you. We have another quick comment over here.
Hello, Council, Planning Board, and community members. My name is Tiffany. I grew up in Gaithersburg and Rockville, and now I'm a homeowner in Bethesda. I'm actually a third generation of my family in Montgomery County. My grandparents moved here with my father, my uncles, and aunts a few years after emigrating to the U.S. from Colombia. Same with my stepfather and his family coming from Chile. Tonight, I want to voice my heartfelt support for the Attainable Housing Strategies Initiative. I sincerely thank the Council and Planning Board for your commitment to making meaningful changes. Growing up here was a profound gift. As a child, I was surrounded by friends and families from all corners of the globe and backgrounds different than me. Gaithersburg and Rockville have consistently ranked in the top 10 diverse cities in the U.S., and this rich diversity shaped my identity. This is a rapidly changing world. We continuously face challenges that demand our attention, and it's crucial that we adapt our housing policies to ensure that the diverse and middle-class people, families, can access safe and attainable homes in our county. The strength of our county lies in its diversity and vibrant middle class. These are not just statistics, they're heartbeats and people. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you. We have a question on this side.
Kenny Hodge, Chevy Chase, Section 3. I just bought a home there less than a year ago, so this has been wonderful to learn what my future might look like. You know, I moved here from a townhome in Northeast DC, and I love living in my townhome, and then I decided I wanted to have a family. I didn't have the space in my townhome. I needed a place like Chevy Chase Section 3 in Montgomery County to move to. It's been incredible. I would pay every dollar over and over again to be able to have the opportunity to live in this neighborhood. And for the record, I'm not a product of generational wealth. My grandfather was homeless. My other grandfather fought in the Korean War. So I thought that that was quite offensive to make that sort of insinuation. My question is, if this plan comes up today, would you vote for it? I would like that answer from all the council members present. And how can we be sure that there will be a neighborhood by neighborhood sort of amendment process to this plan?
Great, thank you for that comment. We have another question. I didn't know if they wanted to speak. Yeah.
All right, a couple of things. One, if it were coming before us today, I wouldn't vote for it because I want to hear from all of you to weigh in. I do think we need to do some work and to figure out where we land. I think that there's a lot of room between doing nothing and doing everything the planning board has proposed. And that's why we're hearing from all of you. That's why we're doing all these listening sessions. I just want to note that on everybody's seat was a flyer. That flyer has a QR code that you can take a picture of. There is an opportunity there to send feedback and questions if we don't get to everybody, because the likelihood is we're not going to have time to get to everybody because we're just about at time now. We're going to try to take a couple more questions, but we're not going to be able to hear from everybody tonight. I'd encourage you also to join us for the October 2nd virtual session. and to use the QR code or follow up afterwards, and you can send your feedback to us electronically.
Thank you, Council President. We have a comment right here. If we can be respectful of those speaking. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for hosting this. I am in support of this plan, and I think that we all recognize the need for change. And if we didn't believe in change, then I wouldn't be standing in this room with you all today. But my question is, if we go back to the slide that looked at the changing of the zoning, that is only an option and not saying that that is what is absolutely will happen. These triplexes or duplexes is just giving us the opportunity to build these things, not saying that they're absolutely going to show up in the space. Yeah.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you. We'll take one last question.
The aspect of your plan that creates as of right construction of these units puts an immediate cloud on the title of every single family property in Montgomery County. No new home buyer will be purchasing a home in a single family zone community. And if any existing homeowner continues to pay their property taxes based on the previous assessment that assumed they were in a single family zoned detached community, I'd be very surprised. So I think you'd expect an immediate challenge to the entire property tax base from every homeowner who has that cloud on the title of their land.
Great. Thank you. I think we have another question on.
All right, we're going to take two more questions, then we do have to clear the room.
Got you. Thank you.
Good evening. Thank you for being here, for taking a lot of stuff from a lot of people tonight. I do appreciate the level of listening. My name is David Yellen. I'm a relatively recent resident of Montgomery County. I live in the Battery Park area of Bethesda. First of all, I want to say that I think that the Attainable Housing Plan is good. I'm completely in favor of it. I think it's worth noting and remembering that we currently live in single-family zoning that was created basically to carve out exclusionary and segregated suburbs, and we're still legislating on that background, so I appreciate anything that's done to make these communities more inclusive. As a new resident, it is really hard to move into this county. It is hard to find communities of young people, and I think there's been a really clear divide between folks who have been here a long time, and I get it, change is scary, and people who are new here and want to see this county be the place that we saw maybe people grew up in, or the place that we want it to be. And so I just, obviously people get scared, people get wound up. I used to be in municipal government myself, so I kind of know what these events look like. I'm wondering, have there been efforts, or will there be efforts to reach out to younger, newer Montgomery County residents, the folks who are, I think, anticipated to move into these attainable homes, and to kind of get all views on this, and not just folks who maybe are looking at their single-family homes, but talk to renters, talk to people who are looking at moving to the county, because I think those are the people who are most affected and who are, I think, really underrepresented in this room.
All right, thank you.
Sir, we're going to the next person.
All right, let's go to the last question here.
Hi, thanks so much. My name is Brooke Thomas, and I live in Chevy Chase. And I want to say I'm very pro-affordable housing, and I'm very pro working for the missing middle, and I'm 100% convinced the plan as presented doesn't really do a lot for those goals. But I want to be constructive. So I guess what I would say to you is I would like you to go more granular, not less granular, as someone said. And I think you should look at the traffic. I think if you wrote the pattern book ahead of time, maybe it would answer some questions. If you did the impact studies that people were talking about, we would understand it. But as it's written, it's very confusing to residents. I hope you really do press pause and not just take 30 days or 60 days, but take the time it actually does to do this important research first. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your question. We are going to take time. As noted, there's nothing before the council yet. I really appreciate everybody coming out tonight. As mentioned, there's a QR code on the flyer that gives opportunity to weigh in here. There'll be many more opportunities to weigh in once we begin the formal legislative process. I want to thank Jordan and Mershai in particular for taking the questions, all of the PIO staff, all the staff here at MCPS for hosting us. I would ask that if you could respectfully try to leave the building as efficiently as possible so that the team here can clean up and get home. It would be very much appreciated out of respect to them. So thank you very much.